Yes, indeed. And of course, in the not too distant future, there was another compounding.
You could almost miss it. That quiet moment right before everything changed. 1 minute, ZZ Top was still rolling, touring, performing, same three guys, same Texas grit. And then, in a blink, the silence dropped. Something had happened, and fans everywhere were left staring at their screens, refreshing the page, trying to make sense of the headline. But it wasn't just a headline. It was the end of something bigger, something that had held steady for over 50 years. Dusty Hill was gone. His passing wasn't preceded by weeks of headlines or dramatic press coverage. No warnings, just absence. On July 28, 2021, the music world stopped cold. Dusty Hill, the legendary bassist and vocal soul of ZZ Top, died quietly asleep at his home in Houston. The statement from Billy Gibbons and Frank Beard was brief, almost too simple for what it meant. "We are saddened by the news that our compadre Dusty Hill has passed away." That single sentence sent shockwaves through generations of fans. And here's the thing. ZZ Top wasn't just another rock band. They were the band. The same lineup. The same energy for over 5 decades. No rotating cast, no reinventions. Just 3 guys who understood the assignment. Create raw, blues-driven, unmistakable sound and never let it fade. And Dusty? He was the backbone. The quiet one. The one whose bass lines held the storm together. The guy on the left side of the stage who didn't need flash to be unforgettable. He was more than just a bearded guy in sunglasses. His voice, deep smoky, always cool, brought tracks like Tush, Lagrange, and beer drinkers and Hellraisers to life. Billy Gibbons often said Dusty had the kind of timing you couldn't teach. He'd walk into a song like he'd lived in it his whole life. And Frank Beard called him rock solid. The guy who never cracked under pressure, never demanded attention, but always delivered. That's why the news hit like a punch to the chest. Social media lit up within minutes. Not just fans, but artists, producers, industry legends. Everyone had something to say. The soul of ZZ Top. A true icon. He made it look effortless. And they weren't wrong. Even those who didn't know the band's full discography could recognize Dusty Hill in a heartbeat. The beard, the stance, the quiet confidence, that presence. And yet, just days before his death, he'd walked away from the tour. A hip injury, they said. Nothing major. Gibbons had even joked on stage, saying Dusty told him, "Give Elwood a bottom end and take it to the top." That was classic Dusty, never missing a beat, even when stepping back. But beneath the humor was a decision that now feels haunting. Because when he left that tour bus, no one realized it was the last time he'd ride with them. What followed wasn't just grief. It was confusion. Questions started swirling. What happened behind the scenes? Was it sudden, or were there signs no one saw? Turns out there were signs. Quiet ones. The kind you miss if you're not looking closely. Dusty had been dealing with chronic bursitis for years, an inflammatory joint condition that made standing, walking, even holding a bass guitar, painful. On top of that, he'd suffered a recent hip fracture, followed by shoulder complications. He was in pain, but he didn't broadcast it. He wasn't that kind of guy. Behind the sunglasses and southern drawl was a man who kept things private until the weight of it all finally caught up with him. And there was more. Reports surfaced that Dusty had also battled ulcers, which can lead to dangerous internal complications if untreated. Sources close to the band now say Dusty's overall health had been declining steadily. Slower energy, tougher recoveries, and growing concern that the road, once a second home, might now be working against him. Still, when he chose to bow out of the tour, it didn't feel like goodbye. Fans assumed he'd be back in a few weeks, maybe months. But behind the scenes, things were different. Friends close to Dusty noticed how hard it had become for him to move, how every step seemed slower, how he stayed seated longer during rehearsals. The man who once carried the low-end rhythm of ZZ Top with ease was now fighting just to keep pace with the day. And yet, until the very end, Dusty never made it about himself. He didn't ask for tributes or pity. He wanted the show to go on. He insisted the band continue without him. That wasn't ego. That was love for the music, for the fans, and for the two men he called brothers for over half a century. Billy Gibbons didn't speak immediately. He needed time. Losing Dusty wasn't like losing a colleague. It was like losing a piece of himself. The kind of grief that doesn't come in waves, but lingers quietly, pressing in every moment. And when Gibbons finally opened up in a raw interview with Classic Rock, the emotion was still fresh in his voice. It was very unexpected, he admitted. Even though we knew he was hurting, none of us thought would end this way. Elwood Francis, the band's longtime guitar tech and Dusty's close friend, was handpicked to fill in. He knew Dusty's sound, his tone, his spirit. And while no one could replace him, Elwood honored him with every note, every night. Still, the shadow of Dusty's absence never faded. And there's something else, something Gibbons only recently hinted at in a podcast. He said there were things Dusty told him in private, stories no one else had heard, memories, fears, dreams of what the band could become after he was gone. Stories Gibbons promised to share when the time feels right. What were those stories? And why is Gibbons waiting? The answer, it seems, lies in what comes next. Because while Dusty may be gone, his imprint on ZZ Top and on Billy Gibbons is far from over. Behind the scenes, plans were already in motion. And when Gibbons finally spoke again, he revealed something that took everyone by surprise. Even with all the ups and downs, Dusty always seemed to find his footing again. During rehearsals for the tour, he showed up with the same fire he'd always had. Focused, locked in, determined to keep things moving. They had scheduled a full week to prep, and everything looked like it was lining up. But when it came time for that first live show, something changed. Billy Gibbons could feel it. Dusty wasn't himself. There was a weight behind his eyes, a heaviness in his presence that hadn't been there before. He wasn't 100%, Gibbons later said. You can't always explain that kind of shift. You just feel it in the silence between songs, in the way someone carries their guitar. After the show, Dusty pulled Billy aside. Calmly, almost too calmly, he said he needed to see a doctor, just to figure out what was wearing him down. I'd like to take a moment and go see the physician, he said, try and make it sound like no big deal. Gibbons thought they had time. Dusty went back to Houston. He set the appointment. But that night, quietly with no sign of what was coming, Dusty slipped away in his sleep. Just like that. Lights out. Gibbons said, still stunned by how sudden it all was. One moment he was preparing to get answers, and the next, he was gone. Gibbons didn't try to mask his grief. In one interview, his voice cracked as he described breaking down in tears, caught off guard by the rawness of it all. I said, gee whiz, maybe I'm human after all. After more than 50 years of friendship, it wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the loss of a brother. Dusty had lived through his fair share of physical struggles, aching joints, shoulder and hip pain, ulcers, but none of it had seemed life-threatening. He'd joke about it, complain a little, but he kept showing up. No one expected that night would be his last. There were no theatrics, no dramatic final act. Just sleep and then silence. Off to dreamland and beyond, Gibbons said. As he sat with the reality of it, Gibbons remembered something his friend Steve Cropper once said after losing a bandmate. I feel like I've lost a great friend. And that went well beyond another musician. That sentiment echoed loud and clear. Dusty wasn't just part of the music. He was part of the heart. Fans across the world were left wondering, could ZZ Top continue without him? Would the groove, the soul, the edge that Dusty brought still live on? The show must go on. Those were his words. Not said lightly, but with conviction. Before the world knew Billy Gibbons as a bearded guitar slinger, he was just a kid from Houston, raised in a home filled with music. His father was a classical musician, and young Billy grew up bouncing between concert halls and blues records. He cut his teeth on B.B. King and Muddy Waters, and by the time he formed the Saints and later the Moving Sidewalks, he already had the fire. That fire caught the attention of Jimi Hendrix, who called him one of America's most promising guitarists. But promise didn't always equal progress. National success stayed just out of reach. The industry was crowded, brutal, and unforgiving. Dusty Hill, meanwhile, was on his own winding path. growing up in Dallas. He started out playing with his brother Rocky in a band called American Blues, alongside Frank Beard on drums. But creative differences split the brothers apart. Rocky leaned into tradition. Dusty wanted something broader, something that fused grit with energy. He stayed, even if it meant leaving family behind. Back then, getting noticed meant more than just talent. Record labels were wary of anything that didn't fit the mold. After the moving sidewalks folded, Gibbons was back at the beginning, but that wouldn't last long. In 1969, everything clicked. Gibbons, Hill, and Beard came together. 3 guys, one mission, to make something new. ZZ Top wasn't about copying anyone. It was about defining their own lane. Texas heat, blues riffs, attitude wrapped in a wall of sound. And it worked. They became a rock and roll constant, pumping out hit after hit. La Grange, Sharp Dressed Man, Legs. But the real magic was offstage. Their chemistry, their loyalty, their trust. Through all the fame and flash, they never lost what made them brothers in the first place. So when Dusty passed, it left more than a vacancy. It left a hole in that sacred bond. Gibbons felt the loss down to his bones. It allowed me to hunker down and get serious with Mr. Beard, he said. And that's when Dusty's last message returned. Clear, firm, unforgettable. He had already chosen his stand-in, Elwood Francis, Gibbons' longtime guitar tech, the man who had been quietly holding the band together behind the scenes for over 3 decades. Dusty didn't just suggest Elwood. He made it clear the show must go on. Don't forget it, he told Gibbons, even pointing his finger to drive it home. So that's exactly what they did. They didn't disband. They didn't pause. They played on, because that's what Dusty wanted. It would be more suitable to try to pick up sticks and carry on, Gibbons explained. And when he stepped onto the stage again, it wasn't just about continuing the music. It was about carrying a legacy. Elwood Francis stepped in not as a replacement, but as family. After years tuning guitars and fixing amps, he now stood in Dusty's place, at Dusty's request. Something poetic happened. Coming out of the pandemic, Elwood had grown a full beard, unintentionally preserving the ZZ Top look. And while his roots were in punk, his energy didn't clash with the band. It amplified it. Gibbons described it as a spark they didn't see coming. You might even consider us being somewhat new as a band, he joked. It's really entertaining, I'll say that. And so, as Dusty's voice faded from the stage, his spirit never left it. Every chord, every riff, every stomp of the boot on wood. He was still there, because some legacies don't fade. They echo. And just like Dusty told them, the show did go on. What came next was a wave of heartfelt tributes and emotional moments that paid homage to the man who helped define a sound, a band, and an era. What he left behind wasn't just music. It was memory. And we're about to show you exactly how that legacy lives on. When Elwood Francis stepped into Dusty Hill's place on bass, it wasn't just a matter of keeping the show running. It was a profound act of trust, fulfillment, and legacy. For years, Elwood had worked in the shadows of ZZ Top's spotlight, tuning guitars, shaping sound, and quietly becoming part of the band's DNA. Dusty himself had chosen Elwood as a successor, not as a replacement, but as a continuation. And when the lights hit the stage for the first time without Dusty, it wasn't silence that followed, it was reverence. Elwood didn't just play notes. He channeled the spirit. He didn't step into Dusty's shoes. Billy Gibbons later reflected. He stepped beside them. In that moment, the audience wasn't witnessing a substitution. They were witnessing a vow. Then came the gut punch, the performance of Tush. Instead of singing it live, Gibbons simply stepped back, letting Dusty's recorded vocals cascade across the arena like a ghostly encore. There at center stage stood Dusty's iconic hat resting on a mic stand, untouched, lit in a single beam of light. The air shifted. Fans cheered through tears. Some whispered his name. It was as if Dusty had found a way to appear one last time, not in flesh but in memory, vibration, and sound. In a world saturated with tributes, this moment somehow felt untouched, raw, intimate, and real. How did a simple piece of wardrobe become a national emblem of grief? That hat, weathered, sweat-stained, unmistakably Dusty, was more than cloth and felt. It was an anchor in time. By giving it the stage, Gibbons wasn't just honoring a friend. He was turning nostalgia into ritual. And the world responded. From LA to London, cowboy hats began appearing on mic stands at open mics, music festivals, and garage jam sessions. It became a language of mourning that fans didn't need to explain. Even musicians who had never met Dusty paid tribute. Ozzy Osbourne, with his usual brevity, called him a great guy with an even greater groove. Slash called him unmistakable. The word hit like thunder, unmistakable. Flea, the post behind Red Hot Chili Peppers, admitted that Dusty was one of the first bassists who made him feel something primal. He made the ground move, he wrote. Paul Stanley of Kiss went further, describing Dusty as the glue that held the ZZ Top sound together. And when Jason Isbell, a voice from the country world, chimed in to say that Dusty's bass felt like it hit you in the chest, it was clear. This wasn't just a rock loss. It was a musical one. Joe Bonamassa added yet another layer, praising Dusty's unwavering loyalty to the blues. He didn't flirt with it. He lived in it. If you listen closely, you'll realize that Dusty never played to impress. He played to connect. In the band's hometown of Houston, the love turned into art. A towering mural soon appeared, painted by local artists who grew up listening to ZZ Top. It captured Dusty mid-performance, eyes closed, beer blowing in the wind, forever caught in the act of doing what he loved. Below it, fans left candles, guitar picks, and handwritten letters. In response, Gibbons and drummer Frank Beard released a joint statement, saying they were humbled and moved by the sheer magnitude of support. People saw in Dusty what we always knew, a man who lived every beat of his life for the music. As tributes continued pouring in, the looming question echoed louder. What will become of ZZ Top now that his heart has stopped beating? Gibbons didn't dodge the question. Instead, he walked right into it. In recent interviews, he's made it clear this isn't about clinging to the past or simply surviving. It's about reshaping what ZZ Top means in a world that's changed. We could have stopped, he said, but that wouldn't have honored Dusty. Moving forward is how we honor him. And that's exactly what they've done. Tour dates resumed. The energy on stage didn't dim. It sharpened. Every pause before a familiar riff, every subtle gesture toward the empty space where Dusty once stood, was a quiet acknowledgement that while something vital was gone, the soul remained. And here's where it gets interesting. ZZ Top isn't just riding the wave of memory. They're creating again. Gibbons confirmed that new material, some of which had been in the works before Dusty's death, is being completed with renewed focus. We're not writing dirges, he said. We're writing motion, music that keeps the wheels turning. A new album is on the horizon, one that promises to blend their signature grit with a layer of earned reflection. Gibbons has also leaned more into his solo career, using it as a space to experiment while remaining tethered to the roots that defined him. Albums like The Big Bad Blues and Hardware reveal a more weathered, introspective side of him. Critics have noted that his playing feels both freer and more precise, as if time itself has sharpened his instincts. There are whispers that his next solo effort might even feature collaborations with younger blues artists, an intentional move to pass the torch without letting go of it. Dusty always said the blues was about what you felt when no one was watching, Gibbons recalled. Now that's what I'm chasing. He's hinted that the band's next phase could be as much about mentorship as his performance, ushering in new sounds without erasing the old ones. He's also developing a documentary that will pull back the curtain on ZZ Top's 50-plus year journey, complete with behind-the-scenes footage, personal reflections, and what he calls the missing chapters, a project designed not to mythologize but to humanize. Looking at Gibbons today, it's hard not to marvel at the transformation. Once part of Texas trio known for boogie riffs and beards, he's now an elder statesman of rock, balancing tribute with innovation. The contrast between past and present doesn't blur his legacy, it sharpens it. And while the loss of Dusty Hill is a scar that never fully fades, it's also the spark for a new era built on loyalty, respect, and musical evolution. Dusty Hill didn't need headlines to be legendary. He just needed 4 strings and a groove that wouldn't quit. From dusty bar stages to sold-out arenas, he never chased the spotlight and somehow always found him anyway. His passing wasn't just a loss of a bassist. It was a closing note of an era built on brotherhood, grit, and the purest kind of loyalty. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Drop your thoughts below. We want to hear your dusty memories. And subscribe for more true stories behind the legends.